Hi everyone, I'm Ben. I'm an MD/MS joint degree student, and I'm here to tell you an interdisciplinary story about planetary health and art. And my interest in this is really motivated by the general consensus that it's going to take broad, widespread cultural and values transitions to approach the problems of anthropogenic or human-caused environmental degradation and the health consequences of that degradation. So today, I'll walk us through a brief introduction to what planetary health is, and then I'll, if all goes well, answer my 3 research questions, which are here. Essentially, how and to whom is planetary health currently communicated? What are some best practices in that communication process? And what are the essential core principles of planetary health to communicate to the public? And then finally, I'll wrap up by telling you a little bit about my deliverable, which is a project at the sort of nexus of art and medicine and the environment that I'm calling the Body Ecologic. And so taking one step back, planetary health really makes the simple argument that that our actions have consequences, which I think is something we're all pretty familiar with, but that our environment, our health, and human activities are all interdependent. And it's really a framework and a movement that foregrounds equitable, transdisciplinary, and solutions-oriented systems approaches to both understand and address the consequences of ecological destruction. For example, planetary health might be applied as a framework for understanding how a citywide parks project could sequester CO2, improve community health, and as well as having other economic benefits for the community. It's a relatively new concept, though. It was coined in around 2014, and there's pretty widespread academic belief that it provides one of the most actionable and comprehensive plans or frameworks for addressing these issues like climate change and biodiversity loss and pollution. But how many folks here in this room, by show of hands, have heard of planetary health before? In general, we're a select few. So we had some hands come up, but in general, it's just not very well known among the general public. And one core tenet of the framework is to inspire collective action around health, around human health, and the co-benefits of protecting the environments that sustain us. And so without engaging the public, planetary health will really remain just a talking point in lecture halls and academic journals. And so for this project, my main objective was to identify failures in planetary health communication to the public, to find ways of getting around those failures, and then to apply my findings to a public-facing project. And so in this, my theory of change is improved dissemination of information to generate dialogue, reflection, and values and behavior change. And so my primary research methods along this process were an extensive literature review, interviews with planetary health experts, folks in research, in academia, in epidemiology, global health, journalism, art, and then a comparative analysis of bodily and environmental systems using imagery from satellites of the Earth and imagery, medical imagery of the body. And so some limitations in this project include the limited scope of the interviews and media analyses that I performed, as well as the generalizability of findings on how to communicate to a really diverse public that the US has, with really diverse interests and levels of education. So my first question, how and to whom is planetary health currently communicated? For this, I dove into the literature and performed a series of media analyses. And essentially what I found is that though academia's interest in planetary health has really taken off, that enthusiasm just isn't being translated and disseminated to the public in effective ways. On taking a bit of a closer look at the limited media coverage that environmental degradation's impacts on human health gets, I uncovered some themes that I think you'll find familiar. The coverage really tends to be triggered by specific events, think the 2020 wildfire season, and focuses primarily on the problem itself. It really provides an intellectualized scientific description and discussion of the problem, often lacking nuance or context. And the framing primarily engages the cognitive domain of learning. And and is really tailored toward a more left-leaning, educated audience. And more importantly, though, the coverage typically lacks actionable information, which then generates eco-anxiety, despair, and inaction. So how can we as scientists and health professionals better communicate the values of planetary health? I again dove into the literature, looking at climate change and planetary health messaging, and distilled things down into 3 general concepts or themes. First, illustrating our individual and collective position in an interdependent biosphere is really important in framing the planetary health argument. Second, engaging the affective domain of learning, so people's behaviors and values and beliefs and emotions, is not only more impactful, but it's also more important to actually stimulating behavior change and commitment to action. And then third, planetary health communication really needs to be solutions-oriented and actionable to help alleviate that eco-anxiety and empower folks to feel that they can make a difference in the world, or at least their world. Now, planetary health is a pretty complex and multifaceted framework, and so I wanted to distill it down into a few core principles. And so I performed 15 interviews with various experts, and I asked them essentially this question here at the top of the slide. And four primary themes really emerged. First, situating ourselves as a part of nature, not just in nature, but as a part of nature, is essential to understanding that human activities, environmental systems, and human health are interconnected. And this concept is really derived from indigenous knowledge, and extensive research has shown that the connection itself as an understanding that you're a part of nature engenders pro-environmental behavior and stewardship. Second, health is a uniting concern across social, economic, and political lines. So communicating some of the main health impacts of environmental degradation is a key lever for change. So one example of this is the ways that excessive heat and climate change impact mortality around cardiovascular health and kidney disease. Third, it's really important to convey specific and tangible ecological impacts on specific and tangible ecological impacts of human activity that put us at risk, and then to provide a framework for understanding that risk. So the Planetary Boundaries framework from the Stockholm Resilience Center is a really good example of this, and basically it outlines the essential systems for maintaining life on Earth, and then provides a sense of where humanity stands in pushing those over the edge of being sustainable. So finally, planetary health is centered on solutions and collective action. So providing actionable information and stories of past human success in addressing environmental degradation is really essential. And we also have to, in the process of communicating these things, have to be able to speak to the many co-benefits of planetary health action. Things like economic benefits and as I was mentioning, the human health benefits. And so with these findings in hand, I decided to apply them to an arts project. So using art as a way to speak to that affective domain of learning. And so I'm using the combination of satellite imagery of Earth and histopathology imagery of human tissues as a way of looking into the body. So the first chapter of this really focuses on positioning us within nature. We have a picture of Earth from 3.7 billion miles away, a little bit closer, a circular lake in Quebec, Indianapolis, and then a human egg. The second chapter is really about homeostasis, so how do our systems interconnect? On the left is lung tissue, in the middle, the atmosphere, so stratocumulus clouds, and then on the far right is the Amazon rainforest, which has been called the lungs of the Earth. The next chapter is about dyshomeostasis, so systems imbalanced. And this, on the left, is Kansas and intensive agriculture. And then on the right is one of the products of that. So what happens to your liver is fat depositions that are often associated with processed foods. And finally, I really focus on resilience and hope. So natural systems are naturally regenerative. On the left, we have bone marrow and stomach epithelium, both of which constantly regenerate to maintain homeostasis. And then on the right, regeneration of a forest after fire. And so I really hope that these images have inspired some reflection on your internal and external ecosystems. I want to thank my advisor, interviewees, and classmates, and open up for questions.
That was beautiful. Thanks for your presentation. My question is on your point about how the affective learning process can be more prone to action.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering, what is your ideal expectation out of what people take with them after they go to your exhibition?
I think one of the themes that I didn't have time to cover that speaks to that is the theme of awe, and awe being something that is associated with understanding and with also finding interest or something new that changes how you think about something. And so my hope would be that folks will come to a new understanding of their position in the world and of impact on it, and that based on that would inspire awe and curiosity, which then leads to behavior change in theory. Yeah, good question.
Can you talk me through how you decided to pair the images from the human body and the environment?
It was partly because of a couple of interactions with folks who use satellite imagery for their research, and just looking at some of the pictures that they had, and then coming out of my med school classes, where we spent a lot of time looking at these pictures of pathology and histopathology, and seeing a lot of similarities and thinking about a lot of similarities between the systems. For example, functionally how the systems may be similar, and then also visually how they may be similar. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, great talk, thank you. I was interested by your analysis at the beginning that a lot, or almost all of the communication about planetary health tends to be for like a left-leaning educated population, and I'm wondering if anyone you've talked to, or if you've thought about any just like ways that this topic can reach a non-highly educated, non-left-leaning population, if there's like a different approach that people have, because I think that's a really good.
That did come up in a lot of the interviews, and the main takeaway is that to make sure that you're reaching everybody, you have to speak to their hierarchy of needs, to take it back to Maslow. That for a lot of people, speaking to specifically to things like health, but even before that, to the economics and to the a more like community-centered discussion and that sort of thing, speaking to the values of the people you're talking to. And I would say that since environmentalists haven't made much headway in the past 40 to 60 years with convincing a certain population of the US that these things are important, that we haven't figured out a good way of doing that yet, but TBD. Yeah.
This exhibition, where are you planning on showing it? Because I could almost see some sort of synergy with this question of like, I don't know, art's a really disarming way to communicate. It doesn't have any buzzwords necessarily that may or may not like make someone on the left or someone on the right immediately raise their hackles. So like, did you have any plans to maybe like show this in places that like are not necessarily like Stanford, Colorado, like that sort of thing?
Yeah, and that really is the reason for having both a virtual and an in-person one. Of course, yeah, we live in Palo Alto, and so the plan is to put this online in a format that's really approachable and really oriented toward anyone just clicking through, whether they're a fifth grader or, yeah. But that's a good thing to think about.
Thank you so much. How would you think about communicating to audiences beyond the U.S., specifically the Global South? Art is such a powerful tool that translates language, and the health benefits I think would be different for those in the global south, for example. So curious about your thoughts on that.
I hadn't thought too much about translating this outside of more of a U.S. context. So that's a great question. But I think what I kept coming back to both in literature and in the interviews is that even though the specific health concerns may vary place to place, there's so much overlap in the ways that speaking to improving people's health is a pretty universal way to get people's attention and interest. Yeah. All right.